What's going on, everybody? Rob Doster here from the Field of 68. And today we're going to bring you another episode in our NBA Draft Prospect Profile series. These are going to be dropping throughout May and throughout June, a couple a day. So if you do like this content, make sure you subscribe to the channel and do hit that like button. Anything that you can do to interact with these videos, it really does help the channel. It helps more people like you find this content. And since I have you here, make sure you check out our Instagram and TikTok pages. We are going to be pumping out more unique content over there throughout the spring and the summer heading into the 2022-23 college basketball season. Like, for example, did you know that Penny Hardaway was shot when he was in college? I didn't know that. You can find that story right now live on our TikTok and Instagram pages. The links for those are in the description below. So without further ado, let's get into another Field of 68 NBA Draft Prospect Profile. Welcome back to another edition of the Field of 68's 2022 NBA Draft Prospect Profiles. My name is Rob Doster. I have with me today the one and only Randolph Childress, and we are going to be breaking down Jabari Smith, who, for my money, RC, I think is probably the guy that you would want to take with the number one pick in this draft. He is a 6'10" shooter with a wingspan. I don't know what it is exactly. I just know that you're not going to block that shit length. Right. He averaged 17 points, 7.5 boards, 2 assists, 1 block, 1.1 steals per game. And most importantly, he shot 42% from three on more than 5.5 threes attempted per game. So RC, talk to me about Jabari Smith and how good you think he is.
I think he has the highest ceiling of anyone in the draft. We've been talking all year about the big three with the freshmen. I think he's the best. I think he's the person that I would take. You know, now we know the Orlando Magic will have the first pick. I'm sure they'll work out some guys and create a whole bunch of fluff. And if someone maybe offers them something else, but I think he's the guy with the highest ceiling. It's just a matter of how he matches in with all the other guys that they have down there. They've tend to collect so many players, but I think he's I've been high on him all year long. I wish he would have got the ball more. I thought, Auburn could have played through him a little bit more. I would say he's the hands down number one pick. I think 8 out of 10 teams would take him as the number one pick. I think you'll have a few that like one of the other guys, but I love him. The one thing I think he'll eventually get stronger. I think he'll do a better job of punishing smaller guards, in a post-up game. But I just think he has a chance to be a perennial all-star.
So I want to start, before we get into some of the issues and some of the places I think that he can develop, I want to start with what he does best. And I think when you're talking about Jabari Smith, first and foremost, you have to talk about the jumper. You have to talk about his ability at 6'10" to run off of screens, his ability to operate in the mid post, some of these fadeaway jumpers that he hits. He's not the best off the bounce, but he can create a little bit of separation. And, with how high that release point is, he only needs to create a little bit of separation to get a shot off. So it all starts with that jumper, right?
But he has to play off that. When you shoot it, when you're that size, and like I said, his ability to take, like you said, get in the mid post on smaller guys and just elevate it over him or give him time, because he's one of those guys that you're going to have to put bigger defenders on him that'll make it easier for him to put the ball on the floor when he, as he physically matures to get by guys. I don't worry about it as much because, again, day one, he's coming in, he's going to be able to shoot. He just physically has to mature. And that's most of these guys, except probably Paulo. But I love his game. I just think what he can be, his ball handling isn't bad. He's just more of a straight line. When you see these guys that do a lot of spinning, a lot with some of these guys is just strength, a lack of strength. And guys get on their body. They just can spin. They don't know how to separate. They're not good enough ball handlers. I don't think he's bad. He's not a point guard. He's not I don't like comparing anybody to KD because there are no KDs, but he's that guy that, that I think eventually get some separation in his game, but he has all the other stuff to be able to step in day one and do it.
So here's my hot take, and I want to know what you think about this. Part of the reason why I like him so much long-term is I think that he has the ability maybe one day to be someone that you say, like, that's why they won this series.
Right.
That's why they were able to create these mismatches, right? Because I think there's a real possibility that you can use him as like a small ball 5 in the NBA in certain situations at the next level. I think he's tougher than people realize defensively. Yes. He blocks some shots. I think he's got a frame that can support a little bit more weight. And honestly, like, I think he's a versatile defender. There were a lot of times in that Auburn system where he's switching out, he's guarding guards, he's getting out and chasing people down. Like, I think half of the battle defensively is wanting to be a good defender. And right. I think there's a lot of want to be a good defender with him. So I mean, look, I think that he has everything that you would want out of a all-star caliber player at the next level. I don't know if he has like MVP in his future, but I think that the fact that he can be as good as he has the potential to be defensively, to me, that's what sets him apart.
Yeah, I mean, we never know how those guys get there. There's too many variables that come into play, when we start talking about MVP guys. But he has all the physical tools to be a perennial all-star, and that's what you want. You want somebody, a difference maker. He's as close as a sure thing, I think, in this draft with the major guys going in the lottery. I love him. I think it's hands down. He would have been the guy I took all year long. I don't think that changes. Like you said, I think there's some toughness about him. I wonder, you don't know with these one and done guys. Sometimes you don't know the leadership qualities about them. You just don't know. And Auburn was an older team. And he came in and it quickly became his team because the talent was undeniable. But I don't know how much of an alpha personality wise he is. And you want to see more out of that with the face of your franchise. But again, I'm sure they'll figure some of that out with their interviews and things with it. But the talent alone, I think he's the guy.
So you mentioned the alpha mentality, which is one of the things I think we need to talk about in terms of some of the places that he needs to be able to develop. The biggest issue that Auburn had all season long was that Jabari was clearly their best player. Right. But when it came to crunch time, the guy that got the ball was Wendell Green or KD Johnson. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Wendell Green and KD Johnson thought that they were Steph and Klay Thompson, right?
Right.
But part of the issue was you can't give the ball to Jabari and let him just give him the ball 40 feet away from the rim and say, go get your shot. You got to give him the ball in certain spots, and you're probably going to end up getting a jump shot out of it. He's not someone getting all the way to the rim. So I think that's where he needs to develop, right? And I think that at the very start of his career, he's basically going to be a floor spacer, secondary option kind of a guy.
Right. I don't disagree with that. I mean, we don't know. I mean, with that guard play, and the same thing's going to happen to him at the next level, except he'll probably get more opportunities, but he's going to go somewhere. Like now we know it's probably going to be Orlando. They got some young guys there as well. So they got a good young core. Markelle Fultz will be back there soon. So he'll have other guards that he doesn't have to rely on. They can bring him along at a nice pace. My question would be with him is, like you said, that demeanor, hopefully putting him in that role, like, hey, you're the number one pick. Hey, we want to stick you out in front of this franchise. Maybe some of that onus that rubs off, and he's like, hey, he'll start demanding the ball as a professional, and I know they'll get him in the gym and the game will come. He's a naturally talented guy, but there's things he's improved on, and we'll see that translate, I think, in the next level in the NBA. But give him time. I mean, be patient with him. They have enough guys there. He's not going to an organization without a lot of talent. I mean, they're young. It's just a matter of who's going to be the leader and alpha male of that team. There's probably too much youth there, and they probably need to get some experienced guys, some veterans, some good leaders down there. But I'm interested, like you said, to see how is his personality going to fit it of being responsible, being the number one. That's different. Going to Auburn with a bunch of other guys and being the number one pick in a draft, the level of expectations and everything that he does, this point forward has forever changed. And you want it, but how much are you going to react to adapting to being the face of a franchise? And if you didn't, that's things we questioned about him in college. He just kind of went along. We did see him get upset at the guards at times. So we did say, hey, give me the damn ball. I wanted it. And it seems to be a friction. So he doesn't have to be a rah-rah guy. But I did see some of that in Auburn's games at times with his disappointment when those guys took those shots and he didn't get balls in certain situations. And, you don't want to say, hey, you don't want guys to kind of go along and get along no matter what happens. But when I saw that, considering that I had been questioning that if he was an alpha, when he started getting upset with guys not giving him the ball in certain moments, I'm like, okay, now maybe it's something there, and he's just not getting up. He doesn't want to, at that time, let it out in the media like, hey, man, you guys got to stop shooting these shots and blowing it up. And if coach couldn't will those guys, then damn well a 18-year-old freshman couldn't will those guys. And so that body language shows me that he wants it. It's just a matter of can he provide it at the next level.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that really makes me bullish on him as a prospect is that when you're 6'10", you don't develop that kind of a jumper unless you're putting in the work.
Yes.
His dad played in the NBA.
Yes.
And he has a professional pedigree like in his blood. He just I fully expect him to be able to get that kind of get all the way to the rim and finish. And, especially get a little bit more weight on him, get him into an NBA strength and conditioning program. I think he'll be able to handle some of the physicality a little bit better. So I'm all in on him as a prospect. I think Chet probably has the highest ceiling, right? If you were going to say who's the one guy that could end up being an MVP out of this draft, I think it's Chet. Chet's also a guy I think would be the top 5 pick most likely to end up never really hearing from him again. So Jabari's a guy, like, he's going to end up averaging 20 in the league. I feel very confident saying that.
But see, that's where we differ. I think he does. I think he has a high ceiling. My concern with Chet is I just don't know physically. I love what he could be. My only thing holding him back is we throw that word of physicality out. I don't know how much his body can. His shoulders look as wide as my laptop. Like, I don't know how much meat you can throw on him. Skill-wise, I love him. I think he could be really, really good, but he doesn't shoot it as well as Jabari. Like Jabari, we know day one's going to go in and shoot the crap out of that. Chet shoots it well. I mean, I know we're not getting into him, but I just think, I haven't said that. I think Jabari has a higher ceiling only because I think his frame allows him to add more weight than I truly believe Chet does.
Yeah, and this is going to sound weird to say, but I think that there's a real world where Jabari ends up being a better defensive player in the NBA than Chet Holmgren does because, I mean, he's switchable.
Yes.
He can guard any position you need him to. He has the length to one day potentially be like a rim protecting five. Like I think not a small ball five and be able to protect the rim a little bit. Like I think that kind of what Charlotte does with PJ Washington, where in certain moments they slide him over to the five and go super small and kind of put a point guard on the floor and LaMelo that can space it out and just kind of let them operate like that. Like Jabari can play that kind of a role in the NBA. And that's the kind of thing that you like that's, when you looked at the Warriors, when they made the run where they won, what was it, 3 out of 4 titles or something like that? It was when they had Draymond Green basically playing that role at the five. Now, I don't know, I don't think Jabari will ever be the defender that Draymond was. I don't think he'll ever be the passer that Draymond was. Like Draymond is very unique in his skill set same way with KD. You never want to compare someone to Draymond, right? Like they're both kind of unicorns of what they can do. But I think Jabari can kind of fill that role a little bit. And if you look at some of these, I mean, we just saw the Suns get played off the floor by Dallas in part because no one could deal with, or DeAndre Ayton couldn't deal with the switches and the ball screens that they were throwing at him. And I think that Jabari Smith is a guy that you can kind of plug in there and it solves that problem. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense because you're going to have to guard him. I think the difference in like using that analogy you just did, what hurts those true fives is you play a certain style all year long. If that guy can't punish switches, then you're in trouble. And that's the difference. I mean, Ayton, if Phoenix has to figure that out, but any five, and we'll talk about Mark Williams here later, that's going to be something early on. He's going to do one thing, but I think that guys like that, and I think that's part of the frustration you see with that, is that if that mismatch guy can't score offensively, then you're at a default and you're susceptible. And Dallas took advantage of it. And that's where with Jabari, you don't have to worry about that because you're going to have to guard him on the other end. You're not going to leave him open. You can space him and you got to run him off the line.
So I think, and tell me if this is crazy, I think that a best case scenario for Jabari Smith is somewhere in the neighborhood of a Carmelo Anthony, like just the way that you kind of use him in those mid ISOs and how good of a shooter he is when he's kind of is able to square up and just use his jab series, use like one step back and kind of create a little bit of space to get that shot off. That's kind of what I see him being. Maybe better defensively, maybe not quite the elite scorer that Melo was, but somewhere kind of in that neighborhood. Is that what do you see him? Do you have a comp for him at the next level?
There's certain guys. I like the Carmelo one. I just don't think offensively. I don't think he has that. I thought Melo was just special and offensively just gifted. But I do think defensively he's there. It's hard for me to, you see, I definitely don't make the comparison with KD and those guys. He's one of one. I just don't think there's many footers out there. He's always been a guard and you never question his ability to get to where he is on the floor. But he shoots it so well. I don't necessarily have a cop, but I like the Melo because I do think that's what he does. He's a mid-post, three-point shooting guy. So in that aspect, I do. But I think his upside with his dad, coming from that NBA pedigree, like you mentioned, we'll see how much he adds to his game. And he has some other young guys to grow with him. When guys like this go to teams like this, the only thing I'd always wish that they have, and I wish Orlando Magic does this, is you have to get a true professional in there. Like the worst thing you can do is draft a guy like this and just throw him there with a bunch of other young guys. Like make sure that you sign like, hey, if this is going to be the face of your franchise, then get a vet in the league to say, hey, we need you to do, to be, just make sure, follow this guy, do what he does. You make sure he gets to the gym. Teams do that all year long. Like that's why, Udonis Haslam's down in Miami. It's like, hey, we get all these guys. He took Bam out of Bayou and said, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how our offseason works. That's why I got people wondering why I got like UD, why is he still in the league? That's why. So when guys come in
for
here,
the organization,
yes, he's the guy that kind of says, when you come in here, this is how we do it. And when you start walking around, I mean, you start seeing some of the more successful teams, they have that guy. And it's always a issue to me when you watch this, when organizations like that, like Orlando has a lot of young guys. Mm-hmm. And he's just, here you go. You got another young guy coming in, and they're just waiting to see which guy is going to develop into a star. And you need to make sure you have a true veteran to show him how to be a professional.
Yeah, and I think we both agreed that Jabari Smith, if it all works out, we're looking at a guy that we're going to be talking about as one of the 10 best players in the NBA at some point, a guy that's going to average well over 20 points a game, be an effective defender. I think here's another comp for you. Paul George, somewhere in the neighborhood of Paul George, I think is kind of what we're looking at when it comes to Jabari Smith. But listen, this has been another episode of the 2022 NBA Draft Prospect Profiles for the Field of 68. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to see more of this content. We're going to be pushing out more than 40 of these profiles before the NBA draft comes out. So we will see you guys again in the